The biting cold of a Montana winter couldn't penetrate the warmth of Rose Darling's rage as she stood before Jacob Thornton, the man who had just purchased her 7-year-old daughter. "Please," she begged, her voice breaking as she clutched at his sleeve. "She's all I have. I just need time to earn the money back." The year was 1878, and Silver Creek, Montana was no place for a widow with no means. Rose had tried everything to keep food on their table since her husband's death in the mine collapse 3 months prior. But with the harsh winter setting in and no work to be found, desperation had driven her to the unthinkable. "A deal's a deal, Mrs. Darling," Thornton replied coldly, peeling her fingers from his coat. "Lily will be well cared for as my housekeeper's assistant. You've got your $20. That should keep you fed till spring." Rose watched helplessly as her daughter was led away, Lily's tearful face turning back repeatedly until they disappeared around the corner. The coins in Rose's palm felt like burning coals against her skin. $20 for her daughter's freedom. $20 to survive the winter. $20 that might as well have been her own heart torn from her chest. "Mama," Lily's distant cry echoed through the snowy street, a sound that would haunt Rose's dreams for years to come. 5 years later, 1883, Mitchell Drake pulled his hat lower against the beating sun as he guided his horse through the dusty main street of Fort Bridger, Wyoming. At 26, he'd already lived several lifetimes' worth of adventures as a cattle driver, sometimes lawman, and now a successful rancher with property just outside town. The war had ended years ago, but its shadow still hung over the territories, especially for a man who'd fought for the Union at barely 16. "Afternoon, Mitch," called Samuel Wilson from the general store porch. "Heard you're looking for a housekeeper." Mitchell dismounted with practiced ease, tying his chestnut mare to the hitching post. "News travels fast. My sister's finally getting married and moving to Denver. Need someone to help keep things running." "Well, timing's good. New woman in town staying at the boarding house. Name's Rose Darling. Quiet sort but seems capable. Looking for work from what Martha tells me." Mitchell nodded, making a mental note. "Might stop by later." "Thanks, Sam." Inside the store, Mitchell collected his usual supplies: coffee, flour, ammunition, and a few other necessities. As he approached the counter, the bell above the door jingled and a woman entered. She was perhaps in her early 30s, with auburn hair pulled back severely beneath a faded bonnet. Her dress, though clean and carefully mended, spoke of hard times. Their eyes met briefly before she looked away, but something in that flash of contact struck Mitchell. There was a determination in those green eyes, but also a profound sadness that seemed to have carved permanent lines around them. Sam leaned over. "That's her. Rose Darling I was telling you about." Mitchell turned slightly, watching as the woman handed a small list to the shopkeeper's wife. Her voice was soft but clear as she asked about the price of laundry soap. There was something refined in her manner, suggesting she hadn't always lived a hardscrabble existence. "Mrs. Darling," Mitchell said, tipping his hat as she passed him on her way out. "Mitchell Drake, I understand you're looking for work." Rose paused, studying him with cautious eyes. "I am, Mr. Drake. I need a housekeeper for my ranch 5 miles west, good pay, your own cabin, regular hours." He didn't know why he was being so generous with the terms. Usually, he'd have been more careful, negotiated harder. Something about this woman made him want to ease her burden. Rose's fingers tightened on her small parcel. "When would you need me to start?" "Tomorrow, if possible. You can ride out with me now to see the place if you'd like." She hesitated, glancing toward the boarding house. "I have arrangements to make at Mrs. Hollister's first." "Perhaps I could come later this afternoon. I'll send my wagon at 4, Mitchell replied. "My ranch hand, Thomas, will drive you out." As Mitchell rode home, he couldn't shake the image of Rose Darling's eyes. They were the eyes of someone who had lost something precious and never stopped looking for it. Rose sat on her narrow bed at the boarding house, carefully wrapping her few possessions in a piece of cloth. The position at the Drake Ranch was a godsend. For 5 years she'd been searching, traveling from town to town across the Montana and Wyoming territories, always asking the same question. Had anyone seen a girl named Lily Darling, 5 years of disappointments had weathered her spirit but never broken it. Somewhere her daughter was alive. Rose had to believe that. At 12 now, would Lily even remember her? The thought brought a fresh wave of pain. A soft knock at her door interrupted her reverie. "Mrs. Darling, there's a wagon here for you," called Martha Hollister, the boarding house proprietress. Rose tucked a faded daguerreotype inside her dress pocket, the only image she had of Lily, taken on her 5th birthday. It was her talisman, her reason to continue breathing each day. The wagon ride to the Drake Ranch was mostly silent. Thomas, a weathered man of about 50, occasionally pointed out landmarks but seemed to sense Rose's preference for quiet. As they crested a hill, the property came into view. A substantial main house, a large barn, several outbuildings, and a small cabin set apart from the rest. "That'll be your place," Thomas said, nodding toward the cabin. "Mr. Drake had it built for his sister, but she's been staying in the main house. It's snug in winter, has its own stove." The main house was larger than Rose had expected, built of solid timber with a wide porch and actual glass windows. Mitchell Drake was clearly prosperous by frontier standards. Mitchell emerged from the barn as they pulled up, wiping his hands on a cloth. He'd removed his coat in the afternoon heat, and Rose couldn't help noticing the breadth of his shoulders beneath his white shirt. "Mrs. Darling," he greeted her, helping her down from the wagon, "welcome to Whispering Pine Ranch." He showed her the house first, a well-appointed home with 4 bedrooms, a large kitchen, and even a study with bookshelves. The furnishings were simple but of good quality. Then he took her to the cabin, which was indeed cozy with a bed, table, 2 chairs, and a small stove. "My sister kept it up nicely," Mitchell explained. "She's leaving for Denver next week. Your duties would include cooking, cleaning, laundry, nothing excessive. Sundays off, of course." Rose ran a hand over the small table. "It's more than suitable, Mr. Drake. I accept your terms." "Good." He seemed pleased. "There's something else you should know, Mrs. Darling." Rose tensed slightly. "There was always something else, wasn't there? I make regular trips through the territories. Business, mostly. If you're looking for someone, I might be able to help." Her eyes widened in surprise. "What makes you think I'm looking for someone?" Mitchell's expression softened. "I recognize the look. Saw it plenty during the war. People searching for lost family." Rose didn't immediately respond. She'd been disappointed too many times to easily trust a stranger's offer of help. But there was something in Mitchell Drake's steady gaze that made her reconsider. "My daughter," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lily. She was taken from me 5 years ago in Silver Creek, Montana." Mitchell's brow furrowed. "Taken? I sold her." The words tasted like poison. "To a man named Jacob Thornton. I was starving, desperate. He promised she'd be cared for, just helping his housekeeper. I tried to earn money to buy her back, but when I returned 3 months later, he'd sold his property and left. No one knew where." She expected to see judgment in his eyes, but instead found only compassion. "How old would she be now?" 12. "She has my red hair, but her father's blue eyes." Rose withdrew the daguerreotype from her pocket, handing it to him with trembling fingers. Mitchell studied the image of the smiling child. "I travel to Montana often. I'll make inquiries about Thornton." "Why would you help me?" Rose asked, unable to keep the suspicion from her voice. Kind men were rare in her experience. "Because no child should be separated from their mother," he answered simply, returning the image. "And no mother should have to suffer such a separation." That night in her new cabin, Rose allowed herself something she hadn't felt in years, a glimmer of hope. The following weeks established a routine at Whispering Pine Ranch. Rose proved herself an excellent housekeeper, transforming the already well-kept home into a place of genuine comfort. Mitchell, for his part, was a considerate employer, never demanding or harsh. Rose learned more about him through their brief conversations and from Thomas's occasional stories. Mitchell had fought in the war as a boy, returned to find his parents dead from fever, and had built his ranch from nothing over the past decade. He was respected in Fort Bridger, known for fair dealings and a willingness to help neighbors in trouble. It was during the 3rd week that Mitchell mentioned his impending trip to Montana. "I'll be gone for about 2 weeks. he told her as they sat at the kitchen table one evening. He'd taken to sharing occasional meals with her, claiming he missed conversation after his sister's departure. Thomas will stay on, and the Wilsons from town will check in. Is there anything particular you'd like me to find out about Thornton? Rose set down her coffee cup carefully. Any information at all would be valuable. He was a cattle buyer, fairly well off, dark hair, tall. Lily would be 12 now. Mitchell nodded. I'll start in Silver Creek and work outward. The morning of his departure, Rose watched from the porch as he checked his saddlebags one final time. Something twisted in her chest at the sight of him preparing to leave. In just 3 weeks, she'd grown accustomed to his presence, his deep voice, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. Be careful, she said as he mounted his horse. Always am, Mrs. Darling. He tipped his hat, then hesitated. Rose, he amended, using her first name for the first time. I'll bring back news if I can. After he disappeared down the trail, Rose returned to the empty house, surprised by how lonely it suddenly felt. Mitchell's journey took him first to Silver Creek, a mining town that had seen better days. The mine had played out 2 years earlier, and many of the original residents had moved on. Still, a few old-timers remained, and Mitchell methodically visited each establishment, showing the daguerreotype of Lily and asking about Jacob Thornton. At the town's only saloon, he finally struck gold. Thornton, the elderly barkeeper squinted. Yeah, I remember him. Shifty sort. Used to buy cattle, then started dealing in other things. Left here about 5 years back. Heard he settled near Helena. Other things, Mitchell pressed. The barkeeper leaned closer. Children. Orphans, mostly, but not always. He'd find desperate families buy their kids, claiming they'd work as servants. Then he'd sell them again to wealthy families in the bigger cities. Adoption, he called it, but everyone knew it was more like slavery. Mitchell's hand tightened around his glass. Any idea where in Helena I might find him? Try the Golden Eagle Hotel. He had connections there. Mitchell rode hard for Helena, arriving 3 days later. The Golden Eagle was a fancy establishment catering to wealthy travelers and the city's elite. He cleaned up at a bathhouse before approaching the front desk, where he spun a tale about having business with Thornton. Mr. Thornton hasn't stayed with us in quite some time, the clerk informed him. Nearly 2 years now. I believe he relocated to Denver. That was a stroke of luck. He had contacts there through his sister's fiancé. Did he ever have a young girl with him? Red hair, blue eyes, would have been about 7 when he acquired her 5 years ago. The clerk frowned. Sir, I couldn't possibly remember every guest's companions. Mitchell slid a gold coin across the counter. Try. The clerk pocketed the coin smoothly. There might have been a girl of that description, pretty little thing, but she wasn't with Thornton the last few times he stayed. I heard he placed her with the Blackwell family up near Virginia City. Virginia City was a 2-day ride back the way he'd come. Mitchell left immediately, the urgency of his mission driving him to push his horse harder than he normally would. The Blackwell residence was an imposing mansion on the outskirts of Virginia City, evidence of the fortune William Blackwell had made in silver mining. Mitchell approached the servants' entrance, where he found a middle-aged woman hanging laundry. "Excuse me, madam," he called. "I'm looking for a girl who might work here, Lily Darling." Red hair, blue eyes, about 12 years old now. The woman eyed him suspiciously. "Who's asking?" "A friend of her mother's." "It wasn't exactly a lie. Ain't no Lily here," the woman replied flatly. "But there's a Rachel with red hair. Been here about 4 years. She's up at the main house." Mitchell's heart raced. "Could I speak with her?" "Not likely. Mrs. keeps the house staff on a tight leash." She glanced toward the mansion, then back at Mitchell. "She helps serve tea on the patio at 4. You might catch a glimpse from the road." Mitchell positioned himself carefully at 4 o'clock, behind some trees where he could observe the Blackwell patio without being spotted. Sure enough, a slender girl with fiery red hair emerged from the house carrying a tea tray. Even from a distance, the resemblance to the daguerreotype was striking. He watched her serve tea to Mrs. Blackwell and her guests, noting the girl's careful movements and downcast eyes. She wasn't treated roughly, but neither was she treated as a daughter of the house. When she disappeared back inside, Mitchell had seen enough. That night, he took a room at a local inn and penned a letter to Rose, detailing everything he'd learned. He would continue to Denver to track down Thornton, but she needed to know her daughter was alive and found. Back at Whispering Pine Ranch, Rose had fallen into a rhythm of work that helped keep her mind occupied during Mitchell's absence. She found herself missing him more than she'd expected, looking forward to his return not just for news of Lily, but for his company. When Thomas returned from town with Mitchell's letter, Rose's hands trembled so badly she could barely break the seal. She read it 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Lily was alive. She was in Virginia City, working as a servant for the Blackwells under the name Rachel. Mitchell was continuing to Denver to find Thornton and gather proof of her identity, but he promised to return to Fort Bridger within 10 days. Those 10 days were the longest of Rose's life. She threw herself into her work, scrubbing the house from top to bottom, baking bread daily, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from racing too far ahead. When Mitchell finally rode into the yard, Rose ran to meet him, propriety forgotten in her eagerness for news. "Did you find him?" "Thornton?" she asked breathlessly. Mitchell dismounted, his face grim but determined. "I did. In Denver, just as the clerk said. He's running the same scheme there, but more carefully now." He led Rose to the porch where they sat side by side on the steps. "I confronted him, told him I knew what he'd done. He tried to deny it at first, but I can be persuasive." Mitchell flexed his hand, and Rose noticed the bruised knuckles for the first time. He admitted selling Lily to the Blackwells for $300. "He has the bill of sale, which he's willing to turn over for a price, of course." Rose's heart sank. "How much?" $500. "I've already paid it." Mitchell reached into his coat and withdrew a folded document. "This proves the Blackwells purchased her illegally." "It's enough to get the law involved." Rose stared at the paper, afraid to touch it. "You paid $500 for me? Why?" Mitchell's expression softened. "Because it was the right thing to do, because no child should be separated from their mother, and because—" He hesitated, then continued more quietly, "because in these past weeks I've come to care for you, Rose." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding, a recognition of feelings neither had expected to develop. "We'll leave for Virginia City tomorrow," Mitchell continued. "I've already spoken to the sheriff there. He's willing to help us reclaim Lily legally." Rose finally reached for the document, clutching it to her chest. "I can never repay you for this." "I don't want repayment," Mitchell replied simply. "I just want to see you and your daughter reunited." "And then—" He trailed off. "And then," Rose prompted softly, "and then, if you're willing, I'd like you both to stay, not as my housekeeper, but—" He took a deep breath. "Rose, I know it's sudden, but I believe there could be something between us, something worth exploring." The journey to Virginia City was tense but hopeful. Mitchell had arranged for Thomas to accompany them, providing an extra layer of support if the Blackwells proved difficult. They arrived on a crisp autumn morning, proceeding directly to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Lawson was a gruff man with a strong sense of justice. After examining the bill of sale and hearing Rose's story, he agreed to accompany them to the Blackwell estate. "The law's clear on this," he told Rose reassuringly. "No one can legally sell a child. If this girl is your daughter, the Blackwells have no claim to her, regardless of what they paid Thornton." The Blackwell mansion looked even more imposing in the morning light. William Blackwell himself answered the door, his expression darkening at the sight of the sheriff. "Lawson, what's the meaning of this?" he demanded. "Official business, William," the sheriff replied evenly. "We need to speak with the girl you call Rachel." A heated argument ensued in the foyer, with Mrs. Blackwell joining the fray, insisting that Rachel was their legally adopted daughter. Mitchell remained steady at Rose's side, his presence giving her strength as the Blackwells hurled accusations at her. "You abandoned your child," Mrs. Blackwell spat. "We've given her everything: education, comfort, a future. What can you offer her?" "Love," Rose replied simply. "And the truth." Sheriff Lawson finally put an end to the debate by producing the bill of sale. "This document proves the girl was purchased, not adopted. That's illegal in every territory. Now, are you going to bring her out, or shall I search the premises?" Reluctantly, Mr. Blackwell sent a servant to fetch Rachel. The minutes that followed were the longest of Rose's life. When footsteps finally sounded on the marble floor, she turned to see a slender girl in a plain gray dress approaching cautiously. Lily had grown tall, her red hair now falling in waves past her shoulders. Her blue eyes, her father's eyes, were wary as she surveyed the group of strangers. There was no immediate recognition in her gaze when it landed on Rose. "Rachel," Mrs. Blackwell said tightly, "these people claim to know you." Rose stepped forward, her heart threatening to burst from her chest. "Lily," she whispered, "do you remember me?" The girl frowned slightly, studying Rose's face. "I'm called Rachel now. Your name is Lily Darling," Rose said gently. "I'm your mother." A flicker of something memory perhaps crossed the girl's features. "They told me my mother died." "No, sweetheart, I've been looking for you. For 5 years I've been searching." Rose reached into her pocket and withdrew the daguerreotype, holding it out. Lily took it hesitantly, staring at the image of her younger self. "I remember this," she said slowly. "Father took it on my birthday." "Yes," Rose breathed. "Your 5th birthday, just before he died in the mine collapse." Lily looked up, a tear sliding down her cheek. "I remember you singing to me at night, a song about mockingbirds." Rose nodded, unable to speak through her tears. She opened her arms, and after a moment's hesitation, Lily stepped into them. The feel of her daughter in her arms again after 5 long years nearly brought Rose to her knees. The Blackwells protested, of course. They threatened legal action, insisted they'd given the child advantages Rose never could, but the bill of sale was damning evidence and Sheriff Lawson was firm. By nightfall, Lily's few possessions were packed and she was leaving with Rose and Mitchell. The return journey to Fort Bridger was a time of cautious reconnection. Lily was reserved at first, torn between the joy of rediscovering her mother and grief over leaving the only stable home she'd known for years. Rose was patient, understanding that trust would take time to rebuild. Mitchell proved invaluable during this transition, giving mother and daughter space when needed, but also engaging Lily in conversation, drawing her out with stories and gentle questions. By the time they reached Whispering Pine Ranch, Lily had begun to smile more frequently, especially when Mitchell taught her to handle the reins of the wagon. "Do you think we could stay here?" Lily asked Rose one evening as they settled into the cabin. "Mr. Drake seems nice." Rose smoothed her daughter's hair, her heart full. "Would you like that?" Lily nodded. "He looks at you the way Papa used to, and he found me for you." "Yes," Rose whispered. "He did." The following Sunday, Mitchell invited them to dinner at the main house. He'd clearly gone to considerable effort, with the table set formally and a roast that must have taken hours to prepare. After the meal, he suggested Lily might enjoy exploring his modest library. When she eagerly accepted, disappearing into the study, Mitchell turned to Rose. "I meant what I said before we left for Virginia City," he said quietly. "These past weeks have only strengthened my feelings." Rose met his gaze steadily. "Mitchell, you've given me back my daughter. I can never adequately express my gratitude." "I don't want your gratitude, Rose." He moved closer, taking her hands in his. "I want your companionship, your trust. I want to see if what I feel growing between us might blossom into something lasting. And Lily, she's part of you. I already care for her, and I believe in time we could become a family, a real family." He squeezed her hands gently. "I'm not asking for immediate answers, just a chance to court you properly now that you're no longer my housekeeper." Rose found herself smiling, truly smiling for the first time in years. "I think I'd like that." Spring 1884, the wildflowers carpeted the hills surrounding Whispering Pine Ranch in a riot of colors as Mitchell and Rose stood before the minister on the front porch of the main house. Lily, now 13, watched with shining eyes as her mother exchanged vows with the man who had reunited them. The past 6 months had brought challenges as Lily adjusted to her new life and Rose navigated her changing relationship with Mitchell. But each obstacle overcome had only strengthened the bonds between them. Mitchell had proven himself not just a good man, but a patient one, never rushing Lily's acceptance or Rose's healing. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared to the small gathering of friends from Fort Bridger. Mitchell kissed his bride as cheers erupted around them. At the celebration afterward, Mitchell pulled Rose aside, leading her to a quiet corner of the porch. "I have something for you," he said, pressing a small package into her hands. Rose unwrapped it carefully to find a silver locket. Inside was the daguerreotype of Lily, carefully cut to fit. "So you'll always have her close to your heart," Mitchell explained, "even though she's right here with us now." Rose closed her fingers around the locket, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "Thank you for everything, for finding her, for bringing us home. Thank you for making this a home worth coming back to." He glanced toward Lily, who was laughing with some of the town children. "She's flourishing, and so are you. Because of you." Mitchell shook his head. "No, you were always strong, Rose. You never gave up looking for her, even when it seemed hopeless. That kind of love, that kind of determination, that's what I fell in love with." Rose leaned into his embrace, watching her daughter across the yard. The past couldn't be erased, the years of separation, the guilt, the fear, but it could be healed. And the future stretched before them like the open Wyoming sky, vast with possibility. "I love you, Mitchell Drake," she whispered. "For finding my daughter, for giving us a home, but most of all for seeing me, truly seeing me when I'd forgotten who I was." He tightened his arms around her. "And I love you, Rose Drake, for teaching me what family really means." As the celebration continued around them, Rose felt a peace she hadn't known in years. Her daughter was safe. Her heart was full. And the man beside her had proven that even in the wild unpredictability of the frontier, true love could find its way home. 10 years later, 1894, the Whispering Pine Ranch had expanded considerably over the past decade. New barns stood where once there had been only open fields, and the main house had gained a new wing to accommodate the growing Drake family. Rose sat on the porch swing, watching her 8-year-old son Michael and 6-year-old daughter Emma race across the yard. Nearby, Mitchell was teaching their oldest boy, James, how to properly saddle a horse. At 9, James was the spitting image of his father, with the same determined set to his jaw. Lily, now 23, emerged from the house carrying a pitcher of lemonade. Marriage to the local schoolteacher last year had brought her happiness that overflowed in her ready smile and confident bearing. Though she lived in town now, she visited the ranch frequently, especially since announcing she was expecting her first child. "Thinking deep thoughts, Mother?" Lily asked, settling beside Rose on the swing. "Just counting blessings," Rose replied, squeezing her daughter's hand. "Sometimes I can hardly believe this is our life now. Because of Mitchell," Lily said, watching her stepfather with affection. "Because he never gave up," Rose agreed. "On finding you on us." Mitchell looked up then, catching her eye across the yard. The love in his gaze was as strong as it had been on their wedding day, tempered by years of shared joys and challenges, but never diminished. He excused himself from James and crossed to the porch, leaning down to kiss Rose softly. "What are my favorite ladies discussing so seriously?" "How you saved us," Lily answered. Mitchell shook his head, a gesture Rose had seen countless times over the years. "No, I think it was the other way around. You two saved me from a lonely life of too much work and too little love." As the children's laughter filled the air and the sun began its descent toward the distant mountains, Rose knew with absolute certainty that the desperate choice she'd made so many years ago, the choice that had torn her heart in two, had somehow, miraculously, led her here. To this family. This love. This completion. "We saved each other," she said simply, making room on the swing for her husband. "And that's the greatest blessing of all."